Yes.
So we might have to kill it.
Oh yeah, he puts us in there.
Just tap on it. I'm getting audio from the laptop.
Nobody's getting audio out here.
I know, I killed it because I
right,
need
that's
to
what we
figure out.
wanted.
Yeah.
Even a resolution sometimes. Most of the time, not always. Hey. All right, ready to rock and roll. I want to thank all of our members of the media. I certainly want to thank my colleagues from the Senate and the Assembly who are here. And of course, I want to thank my colleagues who are going to be speaking today. Senator Steve Rhoads, Senator Patricia Canzoneri-Fitzpatrick. We're going to hear from Assemblyman Mike Riley, Senator Bill Weber, as well as Assemblyman Ari Brown. I will say, as far as the Senate members that you're going to be hearing from, we have a couple members who have been on the Antisemitism working group that the Senate put together under Senator Jack Martin's leadership. And of course, you're going to hear from Senator Rhoads, who is a sponsor of a lot of these bills. This is we did the budget 3 weeks late, and then we went home for 2 weeks. And over that 2 week break, we witnessed a really, really depressing, anger-inducing couple of weeks where we watched protests on Columbia University. And I'll let Senator Rhoads talk about that and how we're going to address that, and Senator Canzoneri-Fitzpatrick and Senator Weber and Assemblyman Brown. And they've all been champions of supporting legislation to protect our Jewish community and push back on anti-Semitism. But what is it? There has to be real consequences. And that's what I think we're trying to find, real consequences to the folks who fan these things. And the students, for me, are very frustrating. But, we all were college, or maybe some of us were college students, and I remember being pretty dumb when I was in college, okay? So I expect college kids to very often be kind of dumb or do dumb things. What I don't expect is for college university presidents who earn healthy salaries and university faculty members who earn healthy salaries and are protected in their unions. I don't expect them to be dumb. I don't expect them to participate and fan the flames of anti-Semitism and hatred, and to actually turn these schools almost into places where your kid goes and you can spend $80,000 a year to have them radicalized against America, against Israel. And it's not a coincidence. It's both. It's against one of the staunchest allies the United States has. And the goal, this isn't organic. This is supported by Students for Justice in Palestine. This is supported by groups that have connections to Hamas, a terror network. The goal is to, what are they asking for? Stop your investment in Israel. Why? They want to cause a division between the United States and Israel. That's the goal. This isn't just about, having fun protesting on college campuses. The goal is to cause a material change in foreign relations between the United States and Israel. Why? Because then they believe that will weaken the nation of Israel. And that is their goal, to weaken the nation of Israel. And if you needed any further proof of that, look what happened. I know it wasn't in New York, but on Duke University's campus, Jerry Seinfeld, a New Yorker of Jewish heritage, he is speaking, giving the commencement speech at Duke. And a bunch of students got up and walked out. Because of something he said? No, because he's Jewish. Now you flip that around in almost any other scenario, you tell me that wouldn't be the #1 story, and we wouldn't be passing all kinds of bills here in New York to address that. There is a real anti-Semitism problem on our college campuses here in New York and across the country. And unless elected leaders do something about it, it's not going to change. And this conference is here to say we are going to do something about it. In fact, we had a anti-Semitism press conference where the working group rolled out their agenda, or our policy proposals. And there was a question I remember from the media: do you really think that Jews in New York feel scared? Like, are they actually afraid? I remember this question specifically, and I forget if it was Senator Martins or Senator Weber. Someone addressed that. Well, if you don't think they're scared, take a look at the last several weeks. If you're a student, a Jewish student, you're told you can't go to class. Probably better that you remain remote. You know why they're telling them that? Because they can't vouch for their safety. Period. Period. They can't vouch for their safety. So I think you better go home, because then you'll be safe. And then we have remote commencements or no commencements. That is how colleges respond. Last time I checked, college students get to pay, and they get to go to class, and if you're at Columbia, you get to get what was once a world-class education. That's what you get to do. You do not get to dictate university policy. And that's what I would tell them. Last time I checked, you're 20 years old. Get out of your tent and get in the classroom or get gone. And we'll find someone else who wants to go to an Ivy League school to get an education so they can go out and get a good paying job and contribute to our community. You don't get to run the school. I would take 10 students over the hundreds that I saw protesting there. I have no interest, none. And if I'm Columbia University, you know, I know for years, we support SUNY and CUNY, and I watched SUNY professors and CUNY professors, you know, form a wall to protect the students from the law enforcement. If I could fire every one of those people, I would. If I could fire every one of those people, I would. If I could starve these universities of funding, I would. And this conference would, until they get the message that this is no longer acceptable. You're not going to continue to radicalize our youth against America, against our allies, promote hatred. That's what needs to happen. That's what this conference in the Senate and in the Assembly is trying to do. We're trying to put forward solutions to protect our Jewish friends and neighbors and family members. And I will say this as a close, New York State is home to the largest population of Jews outside of the nation of Israel. There are so many people that have family, they travel back and forth. The idea that we are not leading the fight on this as a state is shameful. And I'll tell you what, it sends a real message. New York should be a refuge. We should be a sanctuary for Jews who live here, who are New Yorkers, who pay taxes, who call this home. And we're quickly not becoming that. And that is a shameful thing, and that is what this conference stands against. And at this time, I want to call up someone. I want to thank him. He really took the lead on this, as well as my other colleagues, but he really took the lead on drafting these bills, some of these bills, and wanting to do this. And I really credit both his leadership on this issue and obviously in our conference, and that is Senator Steve Rhoads.
Thank you, Leader. I want to thank the leader for his comments. I, of course, could not say it better, but that will, of course, not prevent me from trying, right? But the leader underscores a point. I had, along with many members standing behind me, I had the opportunity to watch the 43-minute video of what happened on October 7th, just a snippet of what took place, where you had armed terrorists coming into residential kibbutzes, attacking people on roadways, stepping into homes, murdering entire families, killing children in front of their parents, killing parents in front of their children, shooting babies in the face, and then burning their bodies. The idea that we have people on college campuses who are actually carrying around slogans saying, "We are Hamas," who are calling for death and destruction of the state of Israel and the Jewish people, who are calling for death to America. The notion that we have people who are actually advocating, standing up on college campuses, saying that they support those activities is something that I never thought that I would see in my lifetime. When we were learning about the Holocaust in school, in civics class, I know I often ask myself the question, how is it in 1930s Germany that you got from an individual, from a people who were just like us, to a place where Jews were being led not because of anything they had done, simply because of who they are. They were being led to gas chambers, extermination camps. How do you get from where they were to what happened with the extermination of 8.5 million Jews and others during the Holocaust? And you are seeing that right here in its infancy. And New York, for whatever reason, New York seems to be the epicenter of that. In these nationwide protests, Out of 2,800 arrests that were made, 779 occurred right here in the state of New York. 28% were from right here in the state of New York. And we talk about Columbia, and Columbia is probably the most outrageous example of what took place. But we've seen protests at Columbia, at NYU, at the New School, Cornell, where Jewish students were actually barricaded inside of a library because they were afraid for their safety because of groups that were trying to break in to attack them. Fordham University, Stony Brook on Long Island, SUNY Buffalo, SUNY Purchase, SUNY New Paltz. Every one of these, we have students participating in activities that are supporting, not an idea, that are supporting terrorist organizations like Hamas. And that's not me saying that. That's not my coming up with that phraseology. That's the federal government, under 8 U.S.C. 1189, recognizes Hamas and Hezbollah as terrorist organizations just the same as Al-Qaeda. The notion that we have students participating in active support of that is outrageous. And this conference, over several months, even before October 7th, has been coming out through our anti-Semitism working group with legislative proposal after legislative proposal to combat anti-Semitism, and that has not changed in the days since October 7th. We continue to present actual solutions for how we can address what has to be recognized is an outrageous and growing problem. But to the leader's point, the fact that not only do you have students participating in that, but you have outside groups coming onto our campus without action on the part of university administration and faculty, employees of the state of New York, that are actually coming out actively supporting these same pro-terrorist, anti-American activities cannot be tolerated. Now, every one of us stands here and believes in free speech, the right to free expression. But I think every one of us, if we were seeing a demonstration in the days after 9/11 in support of Al-Qaeda, would have very much stood against that and would have acted against that. This is no different. In many ways, it's worse. And so we need to act, and we need to send the clear message that we're sending today and have been sending all along, which is falling on deaf ears on the part of the majority, since none are here, and since not a single piece of legislation that we've proposed has actually been taken up, even in committee, much less being brought to the floor, that hate has consequences. Hate has consequences for students that participate in it. Last week, Senator Weber introduced legislation that would take away TAP grants from students who are participating in these types of activities on our campuses. And today we're introducing a package of bills that will take action against universities, both SUNY, CUNY, as well as private institutions who receive state funding, take actions against students or anyone who's protesting wearing a mask for the purpose of deceiving and concealing their identity while participating in these activities, with limited exceptions, obviously protecting religious freedom. And also actions against faculty who are participating in these activities, which are clearly not only anti-Semitic, but are anti-American and certainly intolerable. And so we are introducing first Assembly Bill 8289 and Senate Bill 8255 and its companion, Senate Bill 9193, which actually will withdraw funding from public and private institutions who allow protests in support of pro-terrorist activity as defined by 8 U.S.C. 1983, who allow that to take place on their campus and allow university money, university property, university resources to go in support of those activities. And to speak a little more on her legislation, I want to recognize my good friend and a member of the Antisemitism Working Group, Patricia Canzoneri-Fitzpatrick, who's going to speak about another piece of our package of legislation. Senator?
I would like to thank my colleague Steve Rhoads, Senator Steve Rhoads, excuse me, for putting together this package of legislation that is, again, trying to advance the principles that my conference in both the Assembly and the Senate stand firm on supporting our Jewish brothers and sisters. We have to have consequences for actions that are taken, and we're not seeing the support that I thought we would see from the majority in both houses. As we've said, where are they? Why aren't they here? Why aren't they supporting this? Why aren't they speaking out? Why aren't they taking up this legislation? I can't answer that question because they're not here. But I will say that it is far past time that the state take decisive action to tackle anti-Semitism head-on. We have repeatedly come up with common sense proposals, and I'm so proud of our conference that we are pointing out a problem, but we're coming up with solutions. And that's why we keep talking about it. We do have solutions. We do have tools at our disposal that will allow universities to have consequences for their actions. As we just heard, college students are impressionable young adults, and our faculty that is leading them astray and corrupting their mind with ideas, we cannot continue to allow that to go on. To answer a question that our leader brought up, my daughter is a college student, and I can tell you that her roommate, a Jewish student, felt terribly unsafe when there was encampments on their college campus during finals, when they should be focusing and trying to study to finish out their semester. They were distracted by these encampments and the riots and the bullhorns. And yes, there were agitators that were brought onto campuses, and nothing was done to stop that. How do we allow that? If our students want to speak out, as we said, we have the First Amendment. We know that there is a protected right to speak out if they feel that there's something worthy of their voices to be heard on. But to allow agitators to come onto campus and invoke riots and have our faculty join them, have faculty join them, and no consequences, no word from the administration, it can't go on. The bill I've introduced, along with the others, are going to require colleges and universities to take appropriate corrective action when one of their educators promotes the actions of a designated terrorist organization, and if one of those institutions fails to do so, that we would prohibit the institution from receiving state funding. As I stated, educators provide a critical role in helping to shape the minds and opinions of our students and future generations, which is why all the more important that they do not use their position to fill their students with hatred. A professor at one of the New York universities said that he was exhilarated by the horrific October 7th terrorist attack by Hamas against Israel. Such an individual clearly should not be trusted to have a position of influence over our students. And New Yorkers should not be expected to foot the bill for teaching such hatred. Our conference stands in solidarity with our Jewish brothers and sisters who are facing harassment and threats of violence. And we are prepared to work with our colleagues across the aisle, if they are willing, to take steps to ensure their safety. I thank you again for listening to our plea for change, and I'd like to now introduce Assemblyman Mike Riley to speak on his legislation.
Thank you, Leader Ort. Thank you, Senator Rhoads. for taking the lead on this. Thank you to all my colleagues for standing here in support. You know, to get to where we are today, where it comes to the legislation that I introduced and Senator Rhoads carries in the Senate, deceptively wearing a mask and aggravated deceptively wearing a mask, you have to go back to the days when COVID first started. In 2020, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle decided that they were going to remove and repeal a law that was on the books for about 150 years. It prohibited those who gathered for assembly to wear face coverings. And the reason why that law was in place was to do exactly what we are saying today, to stop those who move forward and proliferate hate to hide behind white sheets, hide behind scarves, hide behind masks. During that debate in 2020, we were all on remote. I specifically spoke on that repeal bill. And I said, do we want people in white sheets walking down Fifth Avenue promoting hate? They went ahead and they all voted yes to repeal that long-standing law. Think about this. In 1918, during the Spanish flu, that law was on the books. For another health crisis, did we have to repeal that law? Absolutely not. So here we are, right after they passed it, Attorney General James, who pushed for that repeal, trumpeted it. She was so proud of it, as many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were. They just don't have the foresight to realize when they're being warned that they're going down a dangerous path, as they have on many issues since 2019. New York is always worried in this legislature to be the first. But in that race, they failed to be the best. And that's something that I continuously say when I stand up and speak on issues in the chamber. So what would this legislation do? Well, it would prevent you from wearing a mask if you're assembling with 4 or more people for a protest. It would be a B misdemeanor, similar to a previous law that was repealed. There's a second piece, aggravated deceptive wearing a mask. If you are engaged in an assembly and you are masked and you cause an injury to someone, or you intentionally damage property, or you steal property, it would be an A misdemeanor. Something with a little more teeth than we've had in the past. Now, let's be clear. The right to assemble is a profound right under our Constitution. But as courts have ruled over and over the years, there has to be a balance between public safety and the right to assemble. We're at a crossroads here. And that crossroads is making sure that we maintain public safety while enshrining and ensuring our rights are continued. We have the capability to do both, as we've seen with law enforcement throughout New York State, including the NYPD. We are able to enforce those laws and ensure public safety while still maintaining those constitutional rights. And one of the other constitutional rights is the right to religion. This legislation ensures that those who wear a face covering for religious customs or beliefs, they are not subject to that law. So before anybody claims that there is a targeted persons, people, or individuals, it is not. As I mentioned when I first started, We do not want people in white sheets walking around, causing havoc and chaos and fear. And we don't want others who are going to put those masks on to intimidate, harass, threaten, and promote hate in our communities. So once again, I want to thank my colleagues for all their efforts on this, and we will not stop. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce Senator Bill Weber.
Good afternoon, everyone. You know, today's May 15th, 2024, and over a year ago, my Senate colleagues and I formed what's called the Antisemitism Working Group, over a year ago, where we recognized the increase in anti-Semitic activities throughout this state. Months go by, we took testimony throughout the summer months, and we heard the horrific incidents of the anti-Semitic incidents that our colleagues throughout the state were dealing with every single day. And then October 7th happened, right? And we all know, the biggest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. And what transpired from that? We saw months and months and months of increasing anti-Semitic attacks throughout this region, and especially on college campuses. My colleagues and I issued our report in early 2024, where we introduced vast legislation, common sense legislation, that will deal with anti-Semitic activities on college campuses and throughout our state. My colleagues and I then, a few weeks ago, also had another press conference where we introduced further legislation, common sense legislation, to continually deal with the anti-Semitic activities throughout our college campuses. And we are here again, we're here again today. All Republicans standing behind me. The Democratic Party, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the state Senate and the Assembly, have been silent, and their silence speaks volumes. This is a topic that we should be speaking with one voice. We are a tolerant state. We're the Empire State. We're New York State, right? We pride ourselves in being the first in really protecting the rights of so many groups. Why aren't we protecting our Jewish residents? You know, I represent Rockland County, which has the highest per capita of Jewish residents of any Senate district and of any county in this state. My residents feel unsafe. And, you know, students going to college campuses. Senator Canzoneri-Fitzpatrick mentioned, you know, her daughter's roommate's experience on a college campus. I have a daughter, too, that goes to college, too, and she told me the fear in the eyes and in the thoughts of a lot of the students that go to school with her. These are serious issues. There are moderate Democrats on the other side of the aisle. They should break away from the progressive radicals that are controlling their party and come speak with us in one voice. We want to continue to work with them. We could have bipartisan legislation to finally deal with this. We cannot allow this to go past this legislative cycle with nothing happening. So we're here today. We're calling on our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to come join with us. These are serious times, and we need to have serious action immediately. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you. Now I would like to introduce my good friend, Assemblyman Ari Brown.
Thank you.
Ari.
Sorry, I'm going to move this up a little bit. President Reagan said it in so many different ways, so I'll paraphrase. You know, freedom doesn't come easy. It's just not our natural state. It's something we have to fight for, and that's exactly what we're doing here today. You know, we heard the word context used many times by these so-called presidents of these places of higher education, so let me put things into context. I'm the son and grandson of Holocaust survivors. My immediate family was wiped out. My entire grandfather's family was gassed in the gas chambers. Not a single family member left. You know, I don't have to refer to my children's friends in schools. It was my family. There was nobody. Stomped under a boot, babies thrown up into the air, onto the ground and destroyed in front of them, cremated. So a Jewish person, you know, doesn't only look at October 7th for what happened. We have context, and our context always was 1929. In Hebron, Hebron is where the Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah are buried, where the matriarchs and patriarchs are buried. 67 Jewish souls were destroyed by these exact people. From 1936 to 1939, over 500 Jews in the same area were also destroyed by the same people. We can't say it was because of the state of Israel, though we've lived there for thousands of years, long before anybody. We can't say because of the state of Israel. The state of Israel was only created less than 20 years before I was born. There was no issue of fighting over land. There was simple hatred of the Jewish people. Let me put this whole thing into a different set of context, and I hope the press will take it up with my colleagues who are not here. I have 6 similar bills introduced and signed on by my colleagues, of course, none signed on by the other side of the aisle, 2 of which don't even have bill numbers. Not only are they not letting it come to committee, they're not even assigning it a bill number. You know, there's an expression, Ein chadash tachat hashemesh. It's Ecclesiastes. It says, there's nothing new under the sun. And my esteemed colleague, Colonel Smolin, mentioned to me right before this press conference started, he said, you know, history repeats itself, and it's true. He said 100 years ago, we had 4 socialists that were expelled from the assembly chambers because they were socialists. But today it's quite different. They're not only welcomed in, they're feared by the speaker and others to shut down appropriate bills to keep our Jewish brethren and all of our students and faculty safe. You know, I had written letters and called many times to CUNY Chancellor Matos Rodriguez, to Chairman of CUNY Bill Thompson, who did call back, John King, President of CUNY, and of course to our President Biden. 2 of the individuals did call back and or respond, and they said, really don't see a problem in CUNY or SUNY. Really? You don't see a problem? I don't know, when I went there 40 years ago or 38 years ago, there was a kosher calf. That's no longer there. It's the halal calf. A Jewish student is not only not welcomed, professors, Jewish professors and students are backed into a corner and threatened. So I said, how can I try to help them explain what this bill and other bills are about, because I've discussed it with them. So I came up with a few names for this bill. Maybe we should call it something else. We don't want funding for terror, so perhaps we should call it the Holding Institutions Accountable Act. We don't want education with fear, so perhaps we should call it the Enforcing Anti-Terror Policies Act. We want to foster inclusivity. You know, they always like that fake word, so perhaps we call it the Rooting Out Terrorism Act. But at the end of the day, really at the end of the day, we should hit them where it hurts, and that's the pocketbook. And that's why we should call it the Defunding Anarchy Act. I want to thank my colleagues for standing here with me. I'd like to see some guts and determination from the other side of the aisle, but you'll never see that. So your article should be, why do we have anti-Semitism in the Capitol? Please quote me on that one. Thank you. And now Senator Rhoads for some questions.
I want to thank Assemblyman Brown, Assemblyman Riley, Senator Canzoneri-Fitzpatrick, Senator Weber, and all of my colleagues that stand behind me for their continued leadership on this issue. New York is a melting pot. We've always prided ourselves on being that. And the interesting thing is that I have no doubt that those who are with me here today and those in our respective conferences would be standing here today if we were talking about these acts against the Muslim population, would be standing here if we were talking about these acts against the LGBTQ population, would be standing here if we were speaking about acts against the African American community. Why is it different? Why is it different when we're speaking about our Jewish brothers and sisters? And that's a question that I think we all have to ask ourselves. And it's a question that we have to ask the other side as well. This is common sense. We can't allow ourselves to be hijacked by terror. We can't allow ourselves to be hijacked by hate. We can't allow our institutions of higher learning to become hotbeds of anti-Semitism, hotbeds of pro-terror activities, which is exactly what this is. everyone who's chanting from the river to the sea, something incidentally, which one of my own colleagues in the Senate actually had a protest calling for Palestine to expand from the river to the sea. Look at a map. Look at a map of the Middle East. Look at that phrase and understand what that means. I think that'll answer a lot of questions. So today, and I could go through a list of incidents, and if asked, I certainly will, a list of specific incidents where Jewish students, Jewish members of our community, have literally been in fear for their safety, have been attacked, and this is something that has to stop. It's solely because of hate. And so the message for today is that hate will have consequences in the state of New York if we can get the majority to move on this package of bills and finally stand up for what we've always spoken about. I've stood with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle many times at rallies against what happened at the Holocaust, and we've said the words never again. Well, you're seeing that never is right now, and they're nowhere to be found. So I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank you for covering this important issue. I want to thank my colleagues for their continued leadership, and I'm happy, with the help from some of my colleagues, I'm happy to help answer questions.
Former president once said elections have consequences. We're going into an election in November. I don't see anything from the other eye. What do you tell voters?
Look, pay attention, as we always do, pay attention to the issues. Pay attention to what's happening in the world around us, to where we are today versus where we were 8 years ago, 4 years ago, where we were even 6 months ago. We're living now in a world that seems to be on fire. And there's a lack of leadership. And in fact, the leadership that's been exhibited by certainly the majorities in this House has furthered that chaos rather than trying to solve it. And so rather than looking at what stereotypically voters are supposed to do, what their party registration is, and I don't want to get too much into politics, certainly in this building, instead of politics and instead of traditional allegiances and alliances, look at issues. Look at what's going on in the world around you. Look at the actions that are being taken, not the words, but the actions that are being taken by your elected leaders, and cast your vote accordingly.
This might be a stretch, and this might not be what you're saying, so excuse the question, but are you saying the Democrats endorse it because they're not here, they're not pushing the bill, they're not?
Well, I can certainly say that there are some members who have taken actions that would be in support of hate. But I'm not saying that they support hate. I'm saying that they haven't taken appropriate steps to try and stop it and to try and curtail it.
When you're on the campaign trail and you're running against the challenger who's not an incumbent, they're pretty much, they're not in the mix with this in terms of, so how do Republicans who are challenging Democrats get the message out that Democrats are not, are not supporting this or endorsing this and may not fly this issue?
Mark, it's very simple. You know what? We rely on you guys to do proper reporting and to say just exactly where it is. They didn't show up. They're not giving numbers to the bills. We do our part. We're going to fight it. We need you guys like you to be bold and not be meek and not be afraid by any repercussions. We got to be in this together.
Last question.
Sure.
I was going to say, Mark, listen, all of us here that are the incumbents will go back to our districts and talk about the actions that we take right now, the actions that we plan to take.
when we're in the majority, which will be January 1st of next year. But listen, the candidates out on the campaign trail that are on our side will have our full support, and I'm sure they will be speaking about the same issues, same frustrations, and talk about what they will do with us while we're in the majority next year.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk me through what that means? Because some protesters would say that they were not supportive of Hamas, but were supportive of Palestine. So if you could just kind of walk me through the difference there and how you decide whether a protest would be, supportive of Hamas or terrorist organization. How is that distinction made?
Well, sure. When physical attacks are being made, that's a pretty clear definition. When you have outside agitators that have occupied your campus, for example, when you're looking at the arrest at Hamilton Hall on the campus of Columbia University, 47% of the individuals who were arrested had no affiliation to the university whatsoever. That college did nothing to protect students, even to protect their own buildings from being violently damaged during that occupation. But you have to look at what's being said. Look, if someone wants to call for the end of war, we've had those protests before, right? That's one thing. If someone's calling for the destruction of a Jewish state, for the extermination of an entire group of people based on who they are, if someone is saying, we are Hamas, which is a terrorist organization as defined by the federal government, those are clear instances. And where you are continuing to see universities, I won't say support those activities, though in the case of faculty, in many instances you are seeing them support it, but allow those activities to continue without stepping in to stamp out the hateful speech and to not allow their property and their dollars to be used to provide a platform for that hate speech. Action has to be taken, and we're going to provide them the tools and, more importantly, the incentive to go and do that.
So you're not saying that this would be consequences if there's simply a free Israel or a Palestinian flag flying if they're explicitly supporting Hamas?
Well, I'll tell you that in an instance where you're ripping down the American flag to fly the Palestinian flag over your campus, there's going to be an issue with respect to that. But people do have the right to be able to demonstrate and protest. I don't think anybody certainly here would disagree with that. It is when that peaceful protest crosses the line into hateful speech calling for terrorist activity, which essentially, when you're talking about the extermination of an entire race of people, I would say that's terrorist activity. When you're talking about actions in support of Hamas, a terrorist group, that is terrorist activity. When you're calling for the death to America, that is terrorist activity. That's where you cross the line, and that's where there should be consequences. Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you, everyone, for being here.